Welcome to Raaonline. I am Dr. Sudakshina, Professor of Anatomy. Today we are continuing a discussion on the ventricular system of brain. We have completed fourth ventricle. So now today in this class we are going to complete the lateral ventricles. Then we are going to talk about the third ventricle, and along with that we will be dealing with some question answer series from the ventricular system of brain. Now to continue the ventricular system of brain, in the third lateral ventricles, we have two lateral ventricles which are irregular cavities, and they are situated in the either cerebral hemisphere. In each cerebral hemisphere has two lateral ventricles. So if we just have a recap of the ventricular system of brain, we have two lateral ventricles on either side. So these are the two lateral ventricles, and then these are interconnected with each other and also connected below to the third ventricle. So this is the third ventricle below, and the third ventricle will be connected to that of the, so if this is the third ventricle, so you have a connection of the third ventricle down, so it will be connected with the fourth ventricle through the aqueduct, and this is the fourth ventricle which is a tent shaped and which continues down as the central canal. Now to understand the ventricular system, first is, this is the cerebrum. So the lateral ventricles are the cavities, it is two in number, and they are cavities of the cerebral hemispheres on either side. Now they are interconnected and also they are connected to the third ventricle with a foramen over here which is called the foramen of Monro. So this becomes the foramen of Monro or the intraventricular foramen. Okay, so this is the foramen of Monro. Then we are having the third ventricle, which is the cavity of the diencephalon. So the diencephalon means it is the cavity which is present in between the two thalamus, and also on the floor of the third ventricle we have the hypothalamus. So between the two thalami there is a slit like space, and that forms the third ventricle. So this is the third ventricle over here, and from the third ventricle, so as we go, this is the third ventricle, and from the third ventricle there is a connection, or it continues through the midbrain, and that channel which continues through the midbrain and connects the third ventricle with the fourth ventricle, and that is called the aqueduct of Sylvius. So aqueduct of Sylvius. So where is the aqueduct of Sylvius present? The aqueduct of Sylvius is present within the midbrain. It is a narrow communicating channel which connects the third ventricle to that of the fourth ventricle. So you can get the fourth ventricle over here. Coming to the fourth ventricle, this is the cavity of the hindbrain. So this is lying between the cerebellum behind and the pons and the medulla in the front. So the cavity of the hindbrain is the fourth ventricle. The cavity of the diencephalon, or between the two thalamus and in the floor of it we have the hypothalamus, is the third ventricle, and the cavity of the cerebral hemisphere is the lateral ventricles. The two lateral ventricles are the cavities of the cerebrum or the two cerebral hemispheres. So to repeat, the ventricular system of the brain consists of mainly the four ventricles. So you have the two lateral ventricles. So we have the two lateral ventricles. So let me go to the blank slide. So if we talk about the ventricular system of the brain, we have the two lateral ventricles. So two lateral ventricles, plus we have one third ventricle, okay, and then plus we have one fourth ventricle. So these are the four ventricles of the brain, which are nothing but the cavities of the brain, which will be containing cerebrospinal fluid. So what does it contain? It contains CSF or cerebrospinal fluid, and these ventricles are interconnected with each other, and they are also communicating with the subarachnoid space. So if we talk about the meninges, arachnoid space. So now if we talk about the meninges of the which are covering the central nervous system, so from outside to inside, the meninges which are covering, we are getting the dura mater, then we have the arachnoid matter, and then we have the pia mater. And where is the cerebrospinal fluid present? The cerebrospinal fluid is present in the subarachnoid space. So subarachnoid space will contain the cerebro-CSF or the cerebrospinal fluid. Now, where is this cerebrospinal fluid formed? The cerebrospinal fluid will be formed within the ventricles of the brain. So, if we see the ventricles of the brain, so we have a main lateral ventricle on either side. So, these are the large cavities. So, you can see, we will come to that.